Hey friends, it's Lisa, your go-to gal for all things watercolor painting and DIY crafting, and this is Our Gray House. Today's video is part of a playlist. It's called Everything Flowers, and I'm so grateful for my co-host Katie from Lady Red Crafting and our guest host Tasha from Sunflower Tasha DIYs for helping bring y'all some amazing inspiration today. Check out my description box for details and links. Now let's get to crafting. You probably made this type of flower before. It's your basic tissue paper flower. So I cut out some tissue paper squares. Some are 5-inch pieces and some are 3-inch pieces. And starting off with the smaller 3-inch flower, I counted out 10 pieces of tissue paper and I folded it accordion style, you know, the back and forth type folding like you're making a fan or something. And then I dovetailed the ends, which is just cutting out a triangle out of the end piece. And then I stapled the middle. And then it's just a matter of fluffing out or separating the pieces of tissue paper. You do have to be careful though, because tissue paper is not very sturdy and it can tear pretty easily. So don't just like attack it. You have to be really careful when you manipulate it to fluff it out. And I say this from experience. I don't know if you saw, but I actually tore this one. It's not super noticeable or anything. I'll show you how it turned out in a second, but let's start working on the larger flower. And y'all, I often see larger versions like this at Mexican markets and things like that, and it may be easier to manipulate the larger ones, but you know me, I like tiny, so I'm working on a smaller scale. And I basically do the same thing. Grab about 10 pieces of the tissue paper, fold them back and forth accordion style, and put a staple in the middle. Oh, and sometimes, you know, instead of a staple, I'll tie it with a pipe cleaner or a zip tie or a wire so that I have a stem. But today I did a staple, and after I did that, I cut the ends to a point. And depending on the way you cut the ends, it'll give you a different effect. And then you just start separating each piece of paper. And a reminder, be gentle. I tore this one as well. I don't think we'll have any tissue paper inspectors coming by, so I'm not really worried about it, but it does take a little time to fluff out. And if you use less papers, like maybe 6 or 8, it might be easier. So you may be thinking, what do you do with these? And I'm actually going to make several more of the larger 5-inch size, and I'm going to attach them to some twine to make a really pretty garland. But if you use a wire or pipe cleaner to attach the paper together, you'll have something that you can use as a stem, and you can gather several together and make a bouquet. So I think that would be really pretty as well. You might have most of these items already, but if not, let's head to Dollar Tree and pick up a few things. Grab some paper towels, grab some food coloring. I had Bounty paper towels on hand, so that's what I used. And I'm not sure if that's going to make a difference or not, but I thought I'd mention it. I used a jelly jar and I traced out a bunch of paper towel circles. How many? I don't know. I'm not sure. I thought I had written it down somewhere, but I didn't. I couldn't find it. And then I want to say it was like 5 or so sheets, and then I was able to trace out 5 circles, but I had folded the sheets in half, so maybe I have 50 circles total. Again, I'm not sure. I'm going to show you the way I actually made it, but watch this so I can tell you how you really should do it, because mine had some issues. Well, one issue anyway. So you trace a circle onto the stack of the paper towels and then cut them out. And they do not have to be perfect. We are making a rose, and that's part of nature, and nature is not perfect. So don't stress if your circles are a little wonky. I added some food coloring to a container of water, and the amounts of food coloring or dye will depend on what color you want. So if you want a lighter color, use more water. If you want a darker color, use less water. And you can do more than one color, but I'm just using one, and also captain is supervising. I used the food coloring to dye the circles, and here's where I'm gonna stop you. I show you this video that I'm dipping them into the dye and then laying it on the mouth of the jar. And I've seen several other videos where they do it this way, but don't. It doesn't stay stuck together. And if you mess with the roses too much, once it's dried, the petals will start to fall off. Ask me how I know. I thought that as it dried, like the petals would kind of adhere to one another, like stick together, but they do not. Or at least for me, they didn't. And maybe I should have added some glue to the dye mix, but I didn't. So I'll show you another way in just a second. So here's what I did. Basically, you are layering the petals. I dipped the paper towel circle in the water food coloring mixture, squeezed out all the excess water, and I placed 4 down to begin with around the mouth of the jar there, and then I placed the petal over the spot where the previous petals met, so they kind of overlap. And I did that all the way around, and for the next level of petals, I again placed them down on top of where the previous layer of petals met. And if you just continue that until you, like, the hole in the center is gone or almost all the way gone. I mean, you don't have to, but I like the center to be, like, have more petals. So I let it dry overnight, and it seemed like a little bit wet. Not like wet, I guess damp. And so I let it dry a little longer, then I took it off the jar so the air could kind of circulate better, because it was still, like I said, a little bit damp. I mean, not dripping damp, but definitely not dry. I'll show you a closer look at how it turned out in a bit, but I think it looks really pretty, and my only thought or wish is that I had used glue in that water dye mixture stuff so that it would stick together and stay in place. But now let's go on to the next one. I made these little petals similar to the first rose. In fact, you'll see them again a little later in the video, but these are dried, and I took one petal and I folded it in half. And then I used a glue stick to twirl it around and glue it to a small tiny dowel. To make this tiny flower, I cut a slit in the middle of the petal, and for some I used a hole punch. I would then put the petal on the dowel and slide it all the way to the top, and then I would use a little bit of the glue stick to keep it in place. And I kind of shaped it around the stick to make it look like a flower. And I just kept going and doing that until I felt like I had enough petals to make it look as full as I wanted. And I kind of kept fussing with it because I didn't want the hole to be too big, that I was cutting, or the petals would be too loose. And at first I wasn't adding the glue stick, but I realized it wasn't going to stay in place and like I wanted, so I started using the glue stick. And I am making a smaller size, and I would kind of like to try it with a larger size petal just to see how it works and how that looks. If you've ever tried this, let me know. I'd love to see how yours turned out. I found these little wooden flower pots at Dollar Tree, and they are super adorable. I had to cut down the dowel to size so it would fit. And I wanted to add some leaves to this, so I took some of the petals and I used the green food dye to dye them green. And then once they were dry, I added one leaf to the bottom, and then I took the two other leaves and I kind of folded them so they would look like a leaf, or at least that's what I was trying to do. And then I added it to the pot. And this is how it turned out. Super cute. And I think it would look cute like in a little fairy village or something like that. I mean, maybe like even just a tiny bit smaller. You know I'm totally into watercolor, and I'm going to show you how to make a super quick flower with watercolor paint. I'm using a set by Grabby, but you can literally use the watercolors that you can find at Dollar Tree. Just get something inexpensive and get started. I'm also using Canson watercolor paper, and it's 140 pounds cold pressed and very affordable at Walmart. The majority of the time I paint small, meaning I cut down my paper to 3" by 3" size. And I feel like there's less pressure when you do that, because if I mess up something, it's not a big deal because it's not a big piece of paper. It's just a little one. So to make the flowers, put down 3 small dots of paint and then rinse your brush and then dip it in the water, and just using that, touch the dot and pull the color out. Make a petal shape out of each dot of paint. To make the next flower, you're going to do the same thing. Put 3 dots of paint down. Boop, boop, and boop. And then rinse your brush off, and using just water, touch the dots and pull them out to make a petal shape. It's just really easy. Just kind of make the petal shape how you feel like it should look. And with a green color, lightly touch your brush and pull down to make it a stem. And make a stem for the other flower, and you can add leaves if you want. I added splatter because I've been into practicing adding splatter, but it gets kind of messy. And this is how it turned out. Easy to do and a fun way to relax your brain. So round 2 of the Rose Creation Adventures, I cut out some more paper towel circles, but this time I used a toilet paper tube as my guide, so they're smaller than the first ones. Again, not worrying about perfection, just trying to make it a circle-ish shape. And I have on gloves because I thought the food dye was going to stain my hands, but it didn't. Anyways, this time we are using yellow food coloring. I dipped a small stack of the paper towel circles into the yellow food coloring and water mixture and squeezed out as much excess liquid as I could. And then I laid the petals out on parchment paper to dry individually. And I dyed them yellow because I'm in Texas, and I thought it would be kind of cute to say the yellow rose of Texas. Anyways, we're going to go do the same thing as the first rose, but this time I'm going to use a glue stick. And I thought about using a bottle of glue, but then I wondered how long it would take to dry. And since I'm putting it on a toilet paper tube, would it stick to it? I don't know. I wasn't sure, so I figured using a glue stick would be a safer bet. And the first layer that touches the toilet paper tube does not have glue, but the subsequent layers do. And I was initially putting glue on the rim, but some of the petals were kind of shifting a bit, so I started putting the glue on the petal itself and then layering it on the toilet paper tube. And then I just kept adding layers of petals to try to place them over where the previous layers of petals met. And that way the petals will lay more naturally. At least in my mind they will. And this is how mine is looking, and I set it aside to dry for a bit, and then the only thing, quote unquote, that is wet is the glue. And so just after a bit, you can flip it over and take it off the tube. Here's how both roses turned out. I love them, and I think they would be a great addition to a tier tray, or really just like a little small vignette in your house. Super cute. Here's how everything turned out, and I think it turned out adorable. Thank you so much for joining me in my creative space today. I really do appreciate it. And don't forget to check out the playlist. I'll have it linked below, and my friend Katie at Lady Red Crafting, and Tasha at Sunflower Tasha DIYs, as well as the playlist for more inspiration. And you can follow me in all the places at Our Gray House, but just don't follow me in real life though, because that's creepy. Bye!